12th, 2024. This is the Bluff Town Council work session. The focus of the session is to have the council all have an opportunity to understand the government-to-government EPA grant and what all Erin's been working on with me popping in and out of it, and kind of how this will be executed. So I'm going to turn this over to Erin since this is the main topic. And if I pop off at 1:30, Linda, did you?
Roll call.
Thanks. Good idea. I left my notes sitting at home because I was doing this virtually. All right, roll call.
Linda Sosa.
Luanne Hook.
Hornsby.
Jennifer Davila.
Ann Leppanen.
Erin Nelson serving as town manager.
Thanks for the reminder. At least we only have one agenda item, so I shouldn't need help with that. So Erin, I'm going to turn this over to you. If for some reason I disappear, that's where I've gone with the USDA inspector.
All right, great. So I'm going to expand my screen so you guys can see this as large as possible. I might have to pop back and forth if other people want to join the meeting, unless anyone else can let them in, which I doubt you can. So if we have to stop sharing the screen for a second, that is what happens. All right, so today is all about the building and the EPA grant. So today I want to talk about the current state, project goals, the budget review. I'm going to just briefly talk about the economic state grant as well, just because it ties into how we're using the funds across the board. And then really the purpose of this meeting is to understand what the council thinks about the budgets. If there are big project areas that have been completely missed, if we want to reallocate funds, essentially where we're at in the EPA process is, there's Janet, where we're at in the EPA process is still going through the budget, so there's still some time to make adjustments. So with that, so I also want to hit on this idea of like redesign versus renovation. I think when over the last couple of years, we've been talking about redesigning the building. That would be much more heavily architecture, engineering, changing out layout, things like that. Whereas currently, if we envision a renovation of the current building, utilize spaces as they're currently laid out, we would probably be in a better spot to utilize the funding that we already have without needing to seek multi-million-dollar additional grants. So right now, just as a high level, we have access to the EPA grant, state economic development grant, state cultural capital grant. A portion of that has already been spent on ceiling demolition, and the USDA grant, which is specifically for materials. As of right now, total costs identified for this are $0.1 million. So again, part of the discussion today for this council is going, have we touched all the areas we think we need to touch? And then the conversation will also be held on UDB's side regarding what they think is needed for the building. So we want to reach a consensus between the council and the board. Again, this is not redesigning spaces when we talk about the costs. This is renovations, including big systems like HVAC, electrical, we're replacing flooring and things like that. But this is not necessarily a redesign of the building. So moving into the budget, and this is really what I need feedback on by the end of today's call. So I'm going to go through this whole presentation. I'm going to jump into the Excel document so we can see it all on one page as well. And then as I'm talking today, I want you to make notes about potential. I mean, you've all been in the building, you're aware of the building, but let's really talk about, do we captured the projects we're going to need to capture, or are we really missing funding? And because EPA, we want to have a contract with them by early March. If there are any changes to the EPA budget, we really need to get that locked week, write the grant narrative, so I can update the budget narrative to set it up. So of the $1 million, these are the projects that we're going to be touching. So there's a direct pass through of $200,000 that goes straight to our partner, that goes straight to UDD. Janet and Melanie, who are also on the call today listening in, they will be putting together, with the help of the board, their use of these funds. So when we initially submitted the grant, we didn't have to have detail regarding how those funds are used in the building. But by the time we get to a contract award, we will need the exact same things in terms of how the project funds are going to be used, when they're going to be used, kind of timelines, because all of that rolls up into this whole $1 million. So fire suppression, we know this is top priority. I am proposing about $88,000 of the estimated $285 comes from this EPA grant. Insulation of the building, the number here was estimated based off of some external insulation. They're called SIPs. In terms of like actual insulation and the actual project, it very well could change what that insulation looks like or how it's applied. But for the purposes of this grant, this number here was based off of a very particular installation method. So that's how we got to that. For flooring, we know that there's asbestos in 3,000 square feet of floor tile. I have moved some of the initial proposed funding from asbestos mitigation to asbestos encapsulation. I'm estimating about $152,000 worth of flooring because that asbestos is there. We know that the contractor is going to need to take some additional precautions and we're going to have to fully encapsulate. So some of the funding, most of the funding would come from the EPA grant, and then the state economic grant would cover the rest of that. HVAC, I have projected $200,000. It's just a projection. I have no idea how much it's actually going to cost. And this is one of those things that, it's estimates before we are able to put things out for an actual RFP. So of that, this is what we had originally proposed for EPA funding, and I kept the number the same. Electrical, this line item here, the $96,000 based off of a pandemic estimate of replacing electrical lighting and electrical work in the building. The remainder, 76 EPA remainder, would come from the state grant. I know this is all like very detailed technical, and that's why this isn't a work session. I heard there might be like a comment. If you don't mind, I am going to finish this slide and then I can answer that. So the EPA does require that we do a quality assurance project plan. This is going to require a firm or a contractor to put together this very detailed document. They're usually in the range of like 70 to 100 pages. And so because we have asbestos, we need this. So for them to develop the plan, I'm estimating between $4,000 and $5,500. And this is required by the grant. So that's why that line item is added. We also are required to have a sign. So I don't know if any of you have like driven on any roads recently that have the infrastructure bill sign, but since we're receiving federal funds, we have to put something on the property that indicates that the project was partially funded by the infrastructure bill. Grant administration, this line item here is primarily 2 years worth of a project manager salary plus an additional $2,000 each year for a bookkeeper. Total grant administration is going to be more than that. Some of that will come from in-kind. There's a little bit of a grant administration under the state grant, and then de minimis. So these are our indirect costs, like keeping the lights on and having office supplies. So we took a 5%. We were able to go the whole way up to 10%, but I didn't want to cut into cost too much. So we did a 5% each year, totaling $50,000. And then this contingency was actually closer to $50,000 when I submitted the initial application, but we've reallocated a bunch to cover all these other projects. I am going to stop sharing my screen for 2 seconds because I thought I heard someone either join or have a question, or was there a hand raised?
Yeah, Erin, just I was following on my other screen, but that screen wasn't showing up, was all I wanted to tell you.
Oh, can you see it now?
Now we can. Whatever you just switched, it shows up. But I just wanted to make sure you knew it's not real readable the size it is. But
Okay.
we should all have it on our computers. But
Okay.
just so you know.
All right. So when I do this, you can't see it. Big screen.
It's just really small.
Shoot. Okay. Well, and I had wanted in person today, but that's okay. Let me see.
I think if you go, I think there's something you can hit that just makes it bigger.
Or Erin, I think it's like the screen you choose that you share.
Yeah, I'll just do the entire one. How is that? Any better?
It's still loading. That's better.
It's good.
Yeah, it's a full presenting screen now.
Great. Okay, sorry about that. Alrighty. So that's our EPA areas. Clearly, these are pretty big projects. And so of that $1 million, again, fire suppression, installation, flooring, HVAC, electrical. I completely skipped over. Okay, so solar ready, now that you all can see my screen. So during our conversations with EPA staffers, they requested, so this is an EPA grant. It's definitely focused on the partnership and getting resources out to our community. However, it is EPA. So they actually requested during one of our conversations as to whether we could include a line item that would directly enable us to be solar ready. So this is not the installation of solar panels, but it's merely getting the building to the point that if we were to ever be in the position to obtain or purchase solar panels, potentially through another grant, that the building would be ready for it. So solar ready would include things like evaluation of the roof, electrical work specifically for solar panels, and getting it there. So I just wanted to make sure that you all knew that that was there as well. Again, kind of at the request of EPA, but it is a change from what was initially submitted in April of last year. Okay, lots of information here. I will pause for a second now that it's a little bit bigger. Are there any questions from council about the projects that we've identified for the EPA grant?
Erin, I have one comment that didn't occur to me the last month or two. The insulation figure that you're using is one that Dave and Damien had for that particular type of insulation.
Mm-hmm.
That insulation has been determined to be inappropriate for this building. And so that's maybe something you and I should be digging a little bit into, what insulation is appropriate, because I think that would probably affect that cost.
Do you have any indication as to whether the SIP or SIP insulation is a more expensive or less expensive version? I know they specifically were looking at SIP insulation. Do you have any idea whether that's like a high end or a low end kind of product?
So here's where it would change the cost. There are two people in town who have built with that particular insulation. I keep wanting to say insulation. In order to use that, you have to cut out every window, every door, every piece goes on. It comes in a big square,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have to fashion it. That means you also have to frame it.
Okay.
So it's fine for houses, smaller houses. It does not work for commercial. And I'd had this discussion with Dave and Damien. Neither one of them had ever worked with this material. Both of them, this was an intellectual exercise. They've never seen it on a commercial building. And the two people I went to who have used it, and it was confirmed by the company, this is not intended to be commercial if you have windows and doors. Like if you have a big warehouse, it'll work, but it's not going to work for the amount of detail we have.
Okay.
And so my guess is, and this is just a guess, it's more expensive to use if we had to cut out windows, doors, and frames.
Okay.
SIPs are ideal for new construction, whereas we're not tearing walls down and things like that. I would think that we would be better off if we wanted to insulate our exterior walls to put on a foam board insulation that attaches to the inside of the walls. That's what we do with our masonry construction. You might be able to get away with using SIPs in the ceilings because they look a lot like a sheet of plywood. So it's basically two pieces of wood with the insulation already built inside is what a SIPS is. So, you know, I mean, I would think that you would typically go with a spray foam insulation in the roof, or you could even spray foam, probably a rigid spray foam to the walls and then cover over the top of those with plaster or something like that. But yeah, I would agree that I don't know why you would go in and put SIPs in something like that. Basically building a new wall.
Thanks.
Great. Jen, do you have any indication whether SIPs are more or less expensive than, I'll call it like quote unquote, traditional insulation or like spray foam insulation?
I would say probably they're more insulation because they are they're essentially an individual wall that's built. So, you know, I mean, it's a type of construction rather than just using a regular construction type with insulation. It's basically just like framing up a wall, and you don't have to really do anything else to them. You just, like Ann said, you cut out the windows and doors, but it's essentially the wall itself.
Gotcha. Okay, well, this has been a very helpful conversation. Super good to know. What I'm hearing is probably we can bring this cost down a little bit and probably reapply, reallocate funding to probably the HVAC, if I'm being honest. 19,000 square feet HVAC, that's a big project. So if council is comfortable with that, I will bring down that insulation cost slightly and reallocate.
Erin, you could easily there's a place that does spray foam insulation in Farmington, and I've used them before. They would gladly give you a quote of what it would run, and that's just shooting into the ceiling.
I won't reach out to them now. Once we start moving on RFPs, right. We will.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Governmental, federal grants.
I forgot that part.
No, all good. Okay, cool. Great. Anything else? Any other questions about these project areas listed? I hear maybe a hand up.
That's me. It's Luanne. I'd also like to see on here maybe it doesn't have to do with the building itself, but I'd really like to get those wells maintained so that we can use, non-treated water and have water for the rest of the project. So I don't know if EPA would be the funder for that, or if we need to wait for somebody else or a different route.
So they definitely do touch water. My only concern about using federal funds, EPA specific federal funds from this grant, is it probably would unleash some additional reporting requirements and increase our need, like essentially water needed, but we have to have behind the water usage, if that makes sense. So
you were really breaking up. Can you just repeat what you said? Maybe it'll
sure
come to you better.
So if I hear what you're saying about wells, and I think that that's a great discussion for the outdoor space. If we were to utilize EPA funds to start digging into water, we will have a lot more reporting requirements than what we would have if we used other funding sources. So essentially, as soon as you touch something like air, soil, or water, EPA will require heavy reporting under the grant that probably would be better suited for a different area of funding.
Okay, thank you. You were straight through that time, so appreciate the explanation.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know what's going on with the internet over here, but I keep getting pop-ups saying that the internet is spotty. That's not the word it's choosing, but so there's something on the internet here, Lou. If it looks like we're breaking up, let us know, because I'm in office too, and my screen keeps freezing up.
Okay. I'm going to turn off. So Ann, turn off your video too, and that'll help. I just turned off mine. And then, yeah, definitely tell me if I'm breaking up. Were there any other questions, or like, was I spotty throughout any of the other discussion?
No, you were pretty good for most of it. I guess I got a question, just to see, I don't know, maybe if it could help you out, Erin, with getting some of these numbers more accurate. I don't know if we can engage with anybody at all, like an engineer or anything at all at this point, or like just for, I've used engineers in the past for giving me an escalator price of like different materials and whatever over a period of years, things like that.
If we're not planning to use them for the project, if we're not planning to spend any of our funds, whether they be EPA or other, yes, we could engage them. If they don't want the contract, then yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
If that helps.
Yeah. Well, the engineers I use are in Monticello, so I wouldn't want to call them and get them out of it.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't want to kick them out of the running. And the other thing too, so Britt, Jen, Luanne, you all bring up great points that, like, yes, these are I don't even want to say solid estimates. They're estimates based off of some research that I have been doing. The EPA understands that by the time we get to the RFP process, these figures could change. Now, could completely shoot us in the foot. We might be able, not be able to proceed with all of the scope items that were in scope originally. But that's kind of the risk of these federal grants. As we know, we do have other funding available. But certainly when we talk about like prioritization, that's a really good discussion for us to understand. Like, clearly fire suppression, without a doubt, it has to be done. By the flooring for EPA, yeah, we need to encapsulate those hallway tiles. That's really important. But then, probably realistically, like that solar readiness, it's not necessarily a requirement for us to get in the building. It's a nice to have, it's a want to have, it aligns with our strategic plan. That's probably, if we're going to have to cut, we should start identifying those items that are going to be, they're all important, but those are going to be lower down on the list. So good things to talk about. And yes, it's definitely a fear, and will in all likelihood happen that our estimates are going to be a little low and we might need to do some additional fundraising.
Cool. That's awesome that they're flexible with that.
Yes, not a perfect world. Okay, let me go back here again. Oh, sorry. Okay, so that's the EPA grant. And again, we have a little bit of time to, say a little bit. We've got about a week to talk and see if there's anything else we want to add. But really, these are kind of the big projects that are either required by the EPA or that are important for us to get into the building. As a very high level, because so many of these projects overlap, I wanted to give you an outline of our economic development state grant. So this is the $445,000. And I've got some additional things listed. We're touching additional areas. So I do
Erin,
have.
go back to sharing your screen again, please.
Oh. Thank you, Jen. I thought I did. Can you see it now?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I think.
There we go.
Yeah.
Slow. Yes. Good. Okay. Alrighty. So we have some money for engineering and architecture. I think this is probably a little bit more high level. Again, not redesigning the building, but there are probably things that an engineer could lead us towards in terms of prioritization. X comes before Y. Flooring, I've got the difference from what we had from the EPA grant. And this floor very specifically for the 3 areas outlined in the grant. As a reminder, that is the Care Center, the art gallery space, UDB's art gallery space, and the business incubator shared satellite offices. So that's how we got to this number here, is that's that percentage roughly of the building. Bathroom renovations. So these would be like all the public bathrooms, $90,000. Electrical work, again, for those 3 areas I just described. Additional funding for childcare space needs, commercial kitchen. I don't think we need many updates, but there are probably a couple things for the childcare center that they would need to have added to the kitchen. Business incubator space outside of electrical, outside of the electrical, the flooring and the painting, that's there. UDB would get another $68,000 for their art gallery space. Painting the building inside, roughly $36,000. I've got 3 areas covered. Furnishings. So these furnishings are specifically for those 3 spaces listed. And we can talk about, if anyone is interested, how I got to those estimates, but we did write $30,000 into the grant for furnishing, which is great. Some additional signage. So again, they're very focused on economic development, making sure people know where the building is, having a good, nice front entryway. So that's there. Grant administration fees, again, manager and things like that. We have a line item for marketing personnel. We've talked about that. I've got a contingency budget there. All right, super high level. I don't want to focus on this one too much today, but that does show you some highlights. So funding shortfalls, just so everyone knows that these are still on. HVAC, missing some plumbing funding, some painting, window treatments. I know that seems like a funny one, but we probably need curtains and such. Furnishings, these would be like town of Bluff specific furnishings, which would be like tables and chairs and meeting tables and things like that. Internet equipment and installation. So Emory Telecom would be considered a sole source provider for fiber optic internet. So I was able to get a quote from them. The equipment and install would be about $5,000 that we would probably want to share with Utah Dene Bakea. And then supplies. So some additional supplies like a computer for the project manager, office supplies, things like that. I'm going to take a quick, well, actually, let me pause for questions really fast before I make a detour to Excel. Questions, comments, concerns about what I've presented. Luanne?
Yeah, it just, the HVAC isn't all included in the EPA grant?
No, it's not. And I will say that $200,000 is really just like a shot in the dark. I have absolutely zero idea how much an HVAC system would cost. And until we probably get an engineer online, I think, unless someone knows a lot more about HVAC than I do, please tell me. That $200,000 is truly a shot in the dark. So could be less, could be more. I just don't know.
You know, Erin, the school district is doing the new school and wherever it is. And why don't I reach out to Tom Correo and ask him what those figures are looking like on their bidding process? James, as everybody probably knows, is on medical leave for some surgery he had. So I don't want to bother James, but I'm totally fine with reaching out to Tom.
That would be super helpful. That is probably probably the area where it was the biggest shot in the dark. I do have some additional concerns about just that HVAC in general and whether, you know, we want to pursue a similar system, we're upgrading the same system, if we're installing new things. And again, probably driven a lot by an engineer's point of view. So in terms of prioritization, we'd want to start utilizing state funds, get the engineer in and make sure we're all on the right track. Unless there's someone who like really does know HVAC, in which case come see me if you don't want to bid on the project. Okay. I'm just going to do a quick detour to the spreadsheet so you all can see big picture how this is all laying out. And I'm hoping, again, this is just going to generate some comments from council today about if there are other areas you think that we need to make sure we're budgeting for high level.
Erin, I'm going to jump off now and Britt's going to be chairing the rest of the meeting.
Great. No
Thanks.
Motions except for to adjourn.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, fantastic. So, sorry, it's going to give you that kaleidoscope for just a second. All right. So high level here, and let me blow this up so you can see it a little bit better. Can everyone see my screen? Is that really small?
Pretty
It's small, but
Pretty
yeah.
small. Okay. Let
Oh,
me
there you
just
go.
go a little bigger. Good.
Yep.
Better. Okay. All right. So most of these we've already talked about today. But if anyone needs this high level, the way that I'm tracking it is this is my overall budget. Oops, sorry. Over underfunded. I have a tab for already spent, and I do need to add our demolition costs right here. The EPA submitted was what was initially outlined in the grant proposal. The suggested adjustments are what you and I talked about already today. I have it broken out into calendar year because once we hit $750,000 in federal spending annually, it triggers an additional audit. It is possible that we would hit that next year. Very possible. So I just want to give the council that heads up. Really depends on how fast we can get renovation work going. I have our rural communities. This is the economic grant, USDA, cultural capital, Town of Bluff Direct, UDB contributions, and I'm going to hit on that in just a second, and then in-kind work or donations. So here are all the areas, and I'll just list them out. We've got engineering, demolition, the installation project, which we're going to bring down, fire suppression, flooring, HVAC, plumbing, bathrooms, childcare, commercial kitchen, art gallery, business incubator space, painting the inside of the building, window treatments, furnishings, signage, admin costs, electrical, solar ready, internet equipment, marketing personnel, travel and supplies, which I cut from the AP budget, the QAP, Quality Assurance Project Plan, asbestos testing, we've already spent money for that out of pocket, de minimis, and then UDB's construction. And then I had a line for Town of Bluff general construction, but I took that out. And then I've got a projected contingency here, which is currently, let me see here, currently a part of my total budget, because something's always going to go wrong. So we talked about a lot of this today. If any of you need a copy of this Excel document to dig through, I'm happy to provide that. The one note I wanted to make here, without talking to Janet and Melanie ahead of time, this $100,000 was the money that was deposited into the joint account for the purpose of hopefully fire suppression. So with that 100,000, we would be able to cover the current estimated costs of fire suppression. So that's coming from the EPA grant, USDA, and cultural capital and UDB contributions. So we can definitely have that conversation, but based on that contribution, we would be almost fully funded, or would be fully funded for fire suppression, assuming costs have not gone up significantly since those initial estimates were received. All right. Last but not least, so talking about other costs, other projects, what's missing? Outdoor spaces. Luanne already touched on that we definitely would want to have some irrigation. Program specific areas. I think probably these might be minor for Town of Bluff, but I might be completely wrong. If there are programs that are going to require funding right off the bat, that are going to require materials right off the bat, we should start talking about those. And then for UDB specifically, potentially, there would be some renovations to that modular unit. There might not be. We're just not sure. So let me close this down. I'm going to come back and see you all here. Stop presenting. All righty. So questions and comments about this behemoth project.
Thank you for putting all this together, Erin. Very helpful.
It's a lot. I'm going to leave my camera off because it is glitchy. I'm so sorry. Okay. So let me start with, in terms of renovating a building, y'all have been in there. Where do we think what areas do we think we haven't already touched on?
We've talked a little bit about whether we wanted to take out some interior walls. I think we really, I still don't have a clear picture of space usage in that building other than the multipurpose room, the prior kindergarten room, for daycare. But those are really kind of the only two rooms that I have a clear picture as to what we're looking at.
How they're going to be used. Yep, totally agree with you. And I know that's something that the design review committee has definitely touched on a lot. And so maybe, and I know this is a work session, so it's, you know, it's council specific. However, we do have Janet and Melanie online. Janet and Melanie, Jennifer, and myself, maybe that's something that we can really prioritize. I mean, yes, we need to get this EPA grant signed, get the contract done, but in terms of priorities for the next month or so, I think it would be great to make sure that the council and board are on the same track in terms of building usage. I hear you, Jen. I agree. Yes, Luanne.
Yeah, so my question is, with all this, like taking walls out and all of that, I still feel like we need kind of the overall plan of, so like we say, how many rooms are big, how many are little, who's in what, you know, that sort of division thing. And we've mentioned Design Build Bluff and their connection to the university and their connection to architects and all of that, that would not be bidding on our project. I wonder if that would be a source to reach out to them to help us in the planning, the coordinating, the estimates.
Yeah. Okay. I like that idea. I would want to verify with them, and I think you're right. I don't think that they would be bidding on any projects, but I also don't want to roll them out. So with your permission, I will reach out to Hiroko to get a better understanding of A, if they're interested at all, hopefully yes, and B, if that's something that they could collaboratively work with us in a not necessarily financial way, but you know, from an advising standpoint, perhaps. So yes, I will certainly reach out to Hiroko and to talk about their ability to do that. They're a wonderful resource. But no, I wouldn't want to jeopardize, you know, if they were able to help us from a professional services standpoint. Yeah, just what the scope might be.
So yeah, that would be a question for them, would be if they would be involved like as a bidder, then we wouldn't want to jeopardize that. But yeah, I don't know. You know much more about how the whole government process works, and they're part of a college, so they'll know their end.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks.
I love that idea. Thank you.
Yeah, well,
I
there's
know.
a resource right here in town,
Mhm.
a block away, you know, so I think they could be really helpful.
I completely agree. Yep. I know Jim had reached out late last year, but I will pick that up, and I will keep you all posted and keep the design review committee posted. All right. Other thoughts?
I mean, I guess, yeah, that's of everything I'm hearing. I'm just, architects and engineers as soon as possible. Because I mean, well, you'll have to have it to define anything else. And then if we don't engage them in the right soon enough, we could spin wheels and waste funding, and do wrong things. So just getting the drawing and starting to move, because it's going to that takes forever. Getting all that stuff passed through too. And we've already got money coming in, so, or about to. So,
And I did very purposefully shift the architecture, engineering, professional services away from the EPA grant to, because we really have that state grant in hand within a week or so. We still have to go through RFP process, and it will be probably a sealed bid process. but the funding should be in hand that we could go ahead and do that. So no decisions made today. It's just a work session, but it sounds like it would be good for me to develop that RFP that you all, both boards can agree upon, and we can put that out to bid, because I totally agree with you, Britt. Okay.
And what about project manager on that line of thinking? Because somebody has to decide all of the materials, all of the, all of those decisions, who's doing what, when, and all that. Would that be the engineer, or is there funding for a separate project engineer or project manager? Or is that you?
Yeah, so there is funding for a project manager. I think the scope of what we can reasonably afford for a project manager is going to be more along the line like the relationship management, coordination with contractors, preparing RFPs, and really like keeping us to a tight deadline. If we wanted a true project manager who has like that full construction background, I think it would be very difficult to find someone in our region. So what it's proposed for the EPA grant, we have $37,000 annually for a project manager who would help with the activities I described. Then that person is going to coordinate with an engineer who has all the technical knowledge to execute and make sure that the contractors are executing to what needs to be done. And the hope, so usually architects and engineers, I think, are 2.5% of total project costs. I've dialed down that cost because of the assumption that we are not redesigning the building, but merely renovating the building. HVAC, fire suppression. Those are the two big ones that probably need an engineer's oversight. And I just talked to the EPA today that the fire suppression system specifically, we could put out to bid as a design build project. So that really helps us. So we don't have to do a separate engineer for that. It can be design and build with the same company. Now, before we bring them in, we may want to bring in another engineer who would evaluate the HVAC system, because you wouldn't want to put in fire suppression and completely mess up your HVAC in your ceiling. But all that to say, both those two projects need to get started quickly. We have the ability to put the projects out to bid without having the EPA funding in hand yet. It's a little bit risky, but what we can write in the RFP is essentially, it essentially says like pending funding, we, could talk to the bidders about it. The other thing to note, and it's very, very, very important that everyone understands, we have about $35,000 through the cultural capital grant that must be spent by the end of June. It is supposed to be for fire suppression. We will lose it if we don't spend it. So we need to get that one out to bid. Have to get that one out to bid. And if for some reason the EPA grant was delayed or fell through, the council and board might need to look at other funding opportunities for that fire suppression. Not to make anyone worried, it only needs to keep me up at night. But just a heads up on that some of our funding is at risk if we don't spend it here in the next couple months. So yes, project manager, really gonna help us with timelines, coordination, like agendas for meetings, making sure that big picture stuff's together. Technical stuff is certainly gonna fall to the contractors and engineers. And I think I froze again. Can you all still hear me?
Yep. We hear you.
What a mess.
You're
I thought we had
still fine.
fiber.
You're fine. We're just quiet.
No, I thought we had fiber. You all keep freezing on my screen, so that's unfortunate. Great questions. I think really helps me. I'm really hearing from council that we need to get a full picture of who is in what programs we're having. Totally on board with that. So I will, as an action item, back to DRC that we can start identifying where we need to go.
And I think the main point of that too is, like you say, this grant is for the bigger major stuff. So
Yes.
like you say, getting the HVAC engineer to look at the HVAC or something ahead of time before doing the fire suppression, but we need to get those bigger things. So maybe that bigger, like what all stuff is going to happen inside, we still need to get all that other stuff done. It's just when you get to painting and carpeting and, you know, that sort of putting in the electrical, you want to make sure the rooms are where they're going to be and whatnot. But the other can definitely move forward.
Yeah. And that is the other, you know, as we talk about fire suppression HVAC, yeah, if we're going to tear down 1 or 2 walls, that still will impact those 2 projects. So if we say, yep, we need 1 more really big room, we should make that decision quickly. No, great comments all the way around. And again, you know, it's just, I've been so in the weeds. I feel like I might be missing some big picture items outside of our space, outside of the modular. I haven't touched the modular much.
I mean, we're good with the existing parking and all that, right?
That's a good question. Good question, Britt. I don't know. Are we good with the existing parking?
I mean, to save money, I am, but
Yeah, there's quite a bit of on-street parking.
Okay.
I think there's adequate parking. A question always over there with the parking is the black locust trees, which we would all hate to lose, but they fall kind of regularly.
Yeah.
They drop big limbs.
And then the other thing I'm thinking of on just the outside is if like the entryway to both parts, if we're going to have 2 separate parts, that's part of the overall design. Like, are we all coming and going through one front door, or are there 2 separate units and then sharing the inside space, you know, all that kind of thing. But those entryways could be expensive, I guess.
Yes, excellent point. And I will circle back with Janet and Melanie because yes, it was my understanding that UDB was very interested in having an entryway that would lead, I'm going to call it to like the grand hall, but their main welcome area and art gallery. But I know that's definitely going to be funding specific. So I will take that back as a specific action item for DRC. And I think there potentially could be funding for them already available through that $200,000 or through the $68,000 available to them through the state grant.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good chunk of money to be able to fix that section up. So
Absolutely.
okay, well, it seems like you're really on top of it to me. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the work you put into it. And
there's a lot of information, I know. Great. So I've got parking, trees, I've got outdoor water and like irrigation and stuff like that. Irrigation. I know we had also talked about like asphalt removal. So in terms of like cost and things like that, I don't know where all that would stand. But that one, just thinking through, that one is still on my radar too, that potentially could be an option, but I don't think any decisions have been made.
on the outdoor irrigation, just to be clear, I'm not really recommending that we put like a whole sprinkler system in, although there is one. There's one there for the grass, but more maintenance, making sure those 2 wells are ready to go, that we could just hook a hose on and use that water, and then go to just, you know, kind of traditional irrigation if they want to do some native gardens and you know, the potato growing, all that sort of thing. It would be really nice if we could get, there's a well operator up in Castle Valley that does that sort of thing. So
Awesome. Okay.
Is there anything we need to talk about with like waste or anything like that? Septic, everything's good there. Like,
Fantastic question. You know, I don't know the answer to that.
It's been just fine since it was repaired how many years ago now, and then the school was using it. It was just fine. If anything, all those septic tanks will just be emptying themselves of any sludge that they have. They kind of break themselves down without use.
Mhm.
So there isn't any reason to think that there's a problem. Just takes standard maintenance. We can open up those tanks and look in and make sure everything's working fine.
Thanks, Lou. And Britt, you triggered a thought for me. So in my call with the EPA today, they were talking about how, clearly environmental protection, they've got a role in ensuring that any of the projects that we're doing do not negatively impact the environment. And so we were having a discussion today about how in our RFPs, when we're coordinating with contractors, we need to be very mindful of the impacts, not only of what we're taking out of the building, but like putting into the building or storing by the building before it goes in. So there are 2 endangered species that April is going to have to do a little narrative on. So there's a fish and a bird. I think it's the flycatcher. And what's the fish, Luanne? Britt?
They're 2 fish.
Oh no. Okay.
Yeah, there's the razorback sucker and the pike minnow, and then it's the willow flycatcher.
Yes, I knew that one. Okay, razorback.
What about the humpback chub? Is it off?
I think that one gotten renamed, or it's not one that's up here, or else it was one that got a new name. But yeah, it's not over here. Must be in the Colorado.
That was one we used to watch for the lake.
See, it probably is over.
It might have gotten taken off the
I
list.
think I just think it's over on the Colorado. I don't think it's over on this side, because we've got the razorback sucker and the pike minnow.
Okay, I will alert her that there's probably an additional fish. But anyway, so she has, our project manager has to do a whole lot of coordination. We've got all these cross cutters that dive into other EPA and federal areas. But with all of this, when we're putting things out to bid, when we're working with our project manager, when we're working internally, we need to think about how what we're doing impacts the environment. And so she talked about how, for example, if we were doing storage and for EPA specific funding, or federal specific funding. So since we are doing some work outside of this, for example, some of the demolition that happened over the last couple of weeks, it would not be subject to all of these stringent regulations. However, if we're saying, oh, we're putting in insulation and things are being removed or added, where it's stored on the property could impact soils, could be closer to the river, and just like a whole long list of potential impacts. So not to scare anyone, but just know that April is going to be working with us to make sure that we meet all of their requirements. I do think that they are going to be rather stringent. So Luanne, like your comment about the wells, I would want to keep that out of federal funding. Not to say we're not going to all do the right thing, right? Like we know that there are right, things that we need to do. But just in terms of like how strict they're going to be, she was literally talking about like, well, you have asphalt on the south side of the building. Do you think though, maybe it would be better to like have storage containers outside on the street instead because it's further from the river? Yes, Britt, that face right there. That's how I feel.
Yeah, no. My project's like directly on the river, and they don't even talk about that. That's bizarre. But I get it, I guess. But
yes,
yeah, if you can avoid any of that kind of extra work on your end, would be great.
Phenomenal. Yes. So just a blanket. Hey, lots of stuff we're going to be watching out for. But yeah, when we talk about waste, when we talk about storage, EPA is going to be very, very involved. So I appreciate your understanding and flexibility, and we'll make it through together, everyone. All right.
Hey, Erin.
And I'm sure it's.
Sorry, go ahead, Luanne.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
Where are we on the project manager thing? That we've got like a job description or something we can.
Great. Good question. So yes, I have a project manager description. There are going to be a couple additional things I'm going to add just as, in working with this EPA project. Clearly there's a lot going on. So I'm just going to add just a couple things like the RFPs. and things like that I would want them to be managing as opposed to all sitting over on this desk here. I would recommend that the council and UDB board come to an agreement as to when that can go out. We do have to go through a formal hiring process. It'll probably need to be posted for 10 calendar days. We'll see what applicants we get. We'll have interviews, and then we can go from there. I can get everyone that job description probably by tomorrow. Because the sooner we bring that person on the board, the better. And to note, their salary would be coming directly from the EPA grant. So I think we can go through the hiring process, but it would be difficult to pay them until we've got that contract signed and we can start drawing down the funds.
So, and then managing this person, is that town, is that going to be town staff, or how's that going to work?
That is such a good question. Can I defer that to a conversation with Ann? Because so the person is definitely going to, that role would certainly roll up under town. It would be a W-2 employee. It's not a contractor. They're going to be a W-2 employee. The town would pay fringe benefits like Social Security and, our portion there. But in terms of structurally, if they roll up to the council versus Ann versus me, I think that's a bigger discussion. And I would recommend that it probably rolls up to either Ann or myself, just because we know it can be a lot to report to 5 people. Good question. And good timing too, because when we talk about strategic planning tomorrow, org charts, they're in there. So yes, good question.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Luanne?
Yeah, I just was back on the waste. I think things like having dumpsters when you're taking things out and that they go to a landfill and they're not getting dumped, that sort of thing is what they're looking at. But it's nothing big. It was just a little trivial comment though.
No, for sure. Yeah, it was an interesting discussion today. And we would need to spell out where that landfill is, all that. But no, literally her example was the asphalt was on the south side, which was closer to the river. It was wild. So anyway, we'll handle it as it comes.
She's part of EPA. Is that who's helping you? Okay.
She's our project manager for Region 8. So.
Yeah, they just don't know the area and don't know how far and the distances and all that. So how big.
Other comments? Again, no decision making today. All good comments here. Definitely a little extra homework here for me. And lots of good stuff to bring back to DRC, although most of you are already on the line, which is great. So hopefully not too much to bring back to DRC. Other comments before we depart for today?
I would like to say thanks to Melanie and to Janet both for joining on and sort of hearing the discussion firsthand, and hoping we can all
helps a lot.
Yeah, yes. We can all get together and discuss freely at some point too. So looking forward to working with y'all.
Thank you.
All right.
Anything else? We ready?
I'm set.
All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion to adjourn.
All right.
This is Janet.
Yes, Janet?
I just said thank you. Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry. Awesome. Yeah, thank you too. Man, it's awesome.
We're all waiting for our mute buttons. I'll second the motion.
Okay. All right. So sweet. Motion to adjourn. It's 2:01. Thank you all.
All in favor? All in favor.
There we go. Sorry. First time.
All right.
Sweet. All right. We'll adjourn. It's 2:01. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Y'all too.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.